Hello, happy coders. Today we are going to look at chapter 3B, and this is all about working with elements in your list. In chapter 3A, we talked about lists, and hopefully you've done the exercises 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3. You've probably learned that the commas in between the items in a list are really important. I hope that you have gotten a little bit familiar with the index system for a list. I'm going to pull that up. It's a slide we saw in the last video, and that is still going to be important for this video. Remembering the first item in your list is actually 0. And that's going to be really important as we go through this to keep that in mind. So before we get started here, lists are going to be really important tools in your coding tool set, and a lot of them are going to be dynamic. That means they're going to be changing. You'll build a list and then you'll add and remove elements from it as your program runs its course. For example, you might create a game in which a player has to shoot aliens out of the sky. You might store an initial set of aliens in a list, and then you would remove them from that list each time they get shot down. Adding a new alien to the screen, you would simply add it to the list. So your list of aliens would decrease and increase in length throughout the course of the game. The syntax for modifying an element is similar to the syntax for accessing the element. So to change the element, you're going to be using the name of the list followed by the index of the element that you want to change. And then you're going to provide the new value. So we're going to take a look at that. In this example, let's say we have a list of motorcycles. So let's say we want to change the value of the first item. We want to replace Honda with Ducati. So in line 1, we had created our original list, and you see the first line of the output has Honda in it. That's the original list. And then at point 2, we changed item 0 in the list. We said item 0 now equals Ducati. And then printing the motorcycles, you see that item 0 does in fact equal Ducati. Honda, which was originally stored at item 0, has gone away. We have changed what is stored there much in the same way that we changed what was stored in variables in chapter 2. Of course, you would use this same method to change item 1 or 2. Well, there's only 0, 1, and 2 in this list, right? But let's say you want 4 elements in your list. Here's a new method for you. Append. So you put the name of the list, motorcycles, dot append, and then you put the item in parentheses that you want to append. In this case, it's a string, so I make sure that I have it in quotes. Notice when the list is printed in the second line of the output, it now has 4 items in it, and it has added that item to the end. So notice, to do this, you don't have to have any idea how long your list is. You're simply adding an item to the end of it. Make sure you understand how to do this stuff. And like spelling append is important. So in this case, I'm using my program to build my list. It's possible to start a program and not know what's going to be in the list by the end of it. So to start, I identified a Python that the variable motorcycles is a list. I do that in the first line by using brackets, because you remember lists go in brackets. And then the list is empty, so to add something to it, I use my append method. And so I can append my 3 items to the list. When I print motorcycles, you'll see that Python is storing Honda, Yamaha, and Suzuki in that list. Make sure you understand how this works before we move on. So that's been fun. We added items to the end of our list. Sometimes the order of a list matters and we don't want to stick it on the end. Well, the first way we changed our list, we eliminated an item and replaced it with something else, but our original value went away. So in this example, we're going to add an item into the list at a certain point. This is called insert. So I have an existing list, you see in the first line there. And then at point 1, I'm going to use my new method, insert. And notice the syntax here. The first thing in parentheses is the index where I want to insert it. That is the index that this item will have. And everything else will bump up 1 to accommodate that. So you see the output, Ducati is at 0, Honda is at 1, Yamaha 2, and Suzuki 3, because there are 4 items in our list. Make sure the insert method is working for you before you move on. Of course, you may want to remove something from a list. In this case, perhaps I've lost a motorcycle or sold it. I guess that's happier. So I've got my list, and you see the first output shows me that's what my list originally was. And then at point 1 there, I'm going to delete DEL, delete motorcycles, but not all motorcycles, the item at index 0. And notice this syntax is brackets. Okay? Last syntax, parentheses, 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 but delete is brackets. Notice that, because you're simply referencing the index, which means brackets. So you're going to print your list again, and you see that item 0, Honda in this case, is gone. Yamaha would now have an index 0 and Suzuki an index 1. You're smart. Take a look at this. What do you think it would do? I'm not going to tell you. Run the code yourself. See what happens. What do you think it does? Does it do what you thought it would do? Okay, sometimes you might want to use the value of an item after you remove it from a list. In these examples, we've just been taking it away and it's been gone forever, and that feels a little scary. Like, we don't want it in our list anymore, but do we really want it to be completely gone from our program? For example, you might want to get the X and Y position of an alien that was just shot down, so that you could draw an explosion at that position. The alien was shot down. He's not in your list anymore, but you still need some data from him. In a web application, you might want to remove a user from a list of active members, but you still want that name in your inactive members. The pop method removes the last item in a list, but it lets you work with that item after removing it, almost like the cut and paste in a word processor. The term pop comes from thinking of a list as a stack of items and popping one item off the top of the stack. In this analogy, the top of a stack corresponds to the end of a list. So let's pop a motorcycle from the list of motorcycles. At 1, this should be familiar. We define a list, put some strings in it. The next line prints that list so we see what's in it. At line 2, we create a new variable. We call it popped motorcycle. It could be old user, it could be dead alien, whatever, a variable. And then we use our pop method to store whatever is in that space in popped motorcycles. Then we print motorcycles and we print pop motorcycle. And you see that output there. So how might this be useful? Perhaps you want to tell your user which item was popped. In this case, you're printing a sentence about that. Take a look at this code. There's a lot of stuff in there. Notice your title method, capitalizing Suzuki. You've got concatenation, and of course your new pop method. Make sure you run this code. Pause the video, make sure it works. You can also pop an item at any position if you use the index of the item. So this is actually not the right slide, but if I put a 1 or a 0 after pop, it would pull a different one out. I can also remove it by value. So I can actually tell it what string to remove. Notice number 1, it's not popping anymore. My method became remove. So you want to remove that string. This is helpful if you've forgotten what index is what. Make sure this code works. Make sure you understand the difference between the remove method and the pop method. And here's what that looks like. Check this code out. Type it in your system. Here we're giving that item into a variable so that the variable tells us which one to remove. Make sure you understand it. Make sure it works before you move on. And here we have 3 pages of assignments. Make sure you double check the assignments in Canvas in case there are any additional instructions, but you do need to do 3.4, 3.5, 3.6, and 3.7. In these assignments, you're going to be working with a guest list and adding and removing names to your guest list to practice these new methods that you've learned for lists.